Hello and welcome to Exploring Game Pass. Each episode we'll take a look at some of the best and most unique titles available, as well as the games coming to and leaving the service. Get the most out of your subscription with Exploring Game Pass, brought to you by screenhype.co.uk. New episodes released on the 7th and 21st of every month. Now, on with the show. So, today's game is A Plague Tale Requiem. So I'd heard really good things about the first game, A Plague Tale Innocence, but I'd never actually played it until I saw that it was leaving Game Pass back in September, and I'd wanted to be prepared for the sequel as I'd enjoyed the trailer, so I decided, you know what, I'll give it a go, and I ended up really enjoying it. It was nothing like I'd expected, but the story captivated me. I was super excited to play A Plague Tale Requiem and just dive back into the world and the characters that I'd grown to enjoy from playing the first game. So, here are my thoughts on this wonderful sequel. So the gameplay is mostly based on stealth, and I understand that it won't be for everyone. Like, I know I wasn't expecting that when I first started. There are aspects of other mechanics, such as general adventuring, exploring, as well as crafting, but for the most part, your job is just sneak by the guards unnoticed so you can progress to the next area. And you also have your sling, which you use to take out the guards that you can't sneak past, and to help you navigate obstacles such as rats, because rats can't go past light, and you have alchemical elements that allow you to create light, for example. And you also do get another weapon later in the game, but I won't say what it is because I want to make this episode as spoiler-free as possible so you can enjoy the game with a completely free from distractions. I love that we get to see a happy moment at the start of this game between Amicia, Lucas, and Hugo, who are three of the main characters, because the first game just had so much darkness and intensity, and it was good to see a lighter side to their relationship. And of course it was all too short-lived, but I'm so glad that it was included, and I think it did do a great job of setting the scene and giving more meaning to the later conflict, because if we just dove straight in with all the bad things happening, it would have just been like bad, but the fact that it starts so positively for them, and you get that rush of emotion of, oh, finally they get their happiness, only for it to be taken away, really. And that's not a spoiler, by the way, it happens very early on in the game, but it's still that very first scene of just them being happy together is so important to set the scene, to show who these people can be and what they could have in life. And it shows a really stark contrast between what they end up actually getting. And the character development was superb, especially for Amicia. So Amicia is who you play as for most of the game. Like, you do occasionally play as other characters, but for the most part, Amicia is the main character that you control as the player. And she is the older sister of Hugo, who's got an illness and she needs to protect. And she is such an amazing character. I love Amicia. I loved her in the first game, and I love her even more in this one. Without delving into spoilers, we really get to see the results of the trauma she suffered and how much she's changed as a person. Because at the beginning of A Plague Tale Innocence, she was just that, innocent. We saw her adapting to what was happening while still clinging on to her good nature. And she was distraught the first time she had to kill someone in the first game. It was this knight that was trying to kill them, and she had no option but to kill him before he killed her. Whereas in Requiem, she seems to have no qualms about embracing her darker side when it's needed. And just watching her battle with her own rage, as well as the circumstances that they're thrust into, is really engaging. And I think it shows such an important other side to Amicia, because we've got the fierce protective sister. We see the love she has for her brother Hugo. Like, it's such an amazing, incredible relationship that they have, and seeing the contrast between that fierce love she has and the anger and rage towards those who would commit evil, it's just absolutely phenomenal. And the voice actress does an amazing job of really conveying that, as well as the visual development to show the emotion on her face. It's fantastic. As you would expect if you've played the first game, the plot is as immaculate as ever. I really love how it evolves through dialogue, not just between the main characters, but also in passing conversations that you hear when walking around, because a lot of the game is sort of just moving through in the environment, and there are various NPCs around you, and they talk to each other, not even to you, and you just pick up little snippets of what's going on in the world around, and it just creates a much deeper level of lore, and it's wonderful little attention to detail. And so much of it is shown through what we see in the scenes without it ever being verbally acknowledged. It's just a masterclass in storytelling. You listen to what's happening in cutscenes, you hear the dialogue that your characters say, you hear the dialogue that NPCs say to each other, and you see the way that the environment changes over the course of the game, the way that it develops and progresses. It's just really a wonderful plot and a wonderful way of telling it. We delve deeper into the lore of the Order, which is the mysterious group of alchemists and magisters that are investigating the macular affliction that plagues young Hugo, who's Amicia's little brother. And I love Hugo. He's just the sweetest, cutest boy ever. Like, I adore him. His voice actor is so cute when you hear him speak. The way his character is, like, visually shown on the screen. He's adorable. I love Hugo, because I find that often in games, little children can be so annoying. And if I'm being honest, Hugo was kind of annoying in the first game, but in this game, he's really grown up and matured. Not completely, like he's still an adorable little child, but the way he handles himself and the way he handles what's going on is much less annoying than it was in the first game, because in the first game, it was all, oh look, I'm getting myself into a stupid situation and now you need to rescue me. Whereas in this, him and Amicia really work together, and you see the way that their trust has developed now they know each other better, because for the first few years of his life, they didn't really interact. The mother kept them quite separate because of Hugo's disease, whereas in the first game, they were forced to become close, and now they're thick as thieves, and I really love that. And of course, one of the things that A Plague Tale is really known for is the rats. And if you thought the rats were scary in the first game, they come out in even greater force here. They are as deadly and hungry as ever, and they seem to be in such greater numbers than they were before. Like, no matter where Amicia and Hugo go, they cannot seem to be free of the rats. And not only that, but we also get to see a deeper connection between Hugo and the rats, and watching that develop throughout the game is fascinating, because as it explains in the first game, his condition, which is called the macula, is intrinsically linked with these plague rats that show up. And in the first game, you sort of see him having some level of control over them, and it develops even further in Requiem. And I love seeing that development. I love the continuation of the story from the first game and how it changes into this second one. It's really well done. However, with a larger number of rats comes a larger number of glitches, and this was something I noticed occasionally in the first game, but it's just even more obvious in Requiem. And I play on a Series X, so it's not like it's an issue with my console speed. Like, the Series X is as fast as it gets. I expect it's tied to how complex it must be to develop a code to contain the sheer number of rats we see. Like, we're seeing hundreds, probably even thousands of rats in relatively small spaces, and it just causes so many issues. Like, I encountered several issues with rats splicing through walls, running on thin air, twitching around in place, just like jumping up and down. It's not natural movement, and it's very clearly not supposed to be that way. And for me, it does break the immersion of being surrounded by these terrifying rats when they start doing things that remind you that they're just code in a game. When you're playing a game, sometimes you get so into it and you feel so invested in the characters, and you think, it's almost as if you're actually in that scenario. But if all of a sudden they start doing things that just are very obviously glitchy, it's not going to feel the same. And see, it's hard to criticize them because it is such an amazing game, but I do wish that they'd been able to find a way to eliminate those bugs and glitches just to make it feel a bit more well-rounded. And another very annoying glitch was that in some places, the rats would just disappear altogether and then reappear when you'd already started walking. So at one point in a level, the entire path was completely empty. So I thought, great, and I just ran across it. And then halfway through, the rats just spontaneously appeared in full force. Like, there was nothing, and then all of a sudden, just rats everywhere. And it killed me instantly. And it was super frustrating to die to a glitch, because it's not like I did anything wrong. It wasn't a skill issue. It was a game glitch issue, and that's not fair in my opinion. And I also experienced one very odd glitch, where it spawned me on the wrong side of the level. So I spent ages carefully moving across to what I assumed was the end, dodging guards, escaping rats, working so hard to get there. And then I got stuck at a wall at the end, and I was trying to figure out where on earth I was supposed to go. So I looked at an online walkthrough, and I realised that the wall where I was stuck at was actually where I should have started, and I just spent the past 20 minutes or so essentially backtracking because I had just started at the end point of that level. I don't know how that happened, but it did. So yeah, that was very annoying. But aside from the glitches, the graphics are superb. You can see how much work the developers have put into making this game as visually gorgeous as possible. Like, A Plague Tale Innocence looked decent, but Requiem is just on a whole other level. The amount of detail is phenomenal, and the real star of the show is the lighting. It is so realistic, and it creates just such a depth that the locations feel truly believable, especially the outside ones where you sort of see the sun glinting through the trees, through rocks. It's very impressive work, and it really showcases the amount of progress that's made between the two games, because the first one proved so popular, so I expect they had a bigger budget for this one, and you can really tell the difference when it comes to the graphics. Like, it really does look truly beautiful on screen. Now, I briefly mentioned crafting at the beginning of this episode, and that is done slightly differently in this game. So in A Plague Tale Innocence, you had a wider range of materials like fabric, leather, cord, and those are no longer included in Requiem. You only need tools and a new material called pieces, and they can be found much more frequently. Not the tools, the pieces. The tools are actually probably less frequent than they were in Innocence, but the pieces, you find them just out and about, and you can also, if you have a certain upgrade unlocked, you can recycle excess items that you find and turn them into pieces, so you get more of them, and they are not limited in how many you can store. So when it had the materials for the past game, for example, you might have only been allowed to carry, I don't know, 8 fabric or leather or whatever, whereas in this, there doesn't seem to be a limit to pieces. I mean, there might be, as I do spend them, but you can definitely get up to at least 100, so that's really useful. I think this is a much more practical approach, and I'm glad they made the change, because there's just less that you need to collect, and you don't need to worry about hitting the inventory limit, which is one of my biggest pet peeves with any games, is when I hit the inventory limit. It just makes me mad. I know it's like a way of controlling the progress or whatever, but I hate it. I just wish every game had unlimited inventory. That is how I like to play games. You do still need to use a workbench to upgrade though, and although I think it's a good idea in principle, like I like the idea of having to use a workbench rather than being able to make it anywhere, because that makes it more realistic, but I think the spacing of the workbenches is off because they're very infrequent near the start and the middle of the game, and that just slows down your progress, as even though you have the required materials for upgrades, you just can't do anything about it. And then later on in the game, they're either way too close together that you don't have the time to gather new materials, or they're just far apart again. Like at one point I was playing a level, there was a workbench, I reckon no more than 10 or 15 minutes later than the previous one, and then I had to wait like another 2 hours to find a new one, and it's just, that is just definitely something that could have been improved when they were planning the levels. I don't know how they sort of planned it, I'm sure there was thought that went into it, but I don't think it worked very well. I just think they weren't paced properly to create the right environment for upgrading things. Just like in the first game, you can also craft alchemical ammo, and that plays a huge part in how you navigate your surroundings. So this can be done on the go, and time massively slows down when you open the alchemy menu, which is in the same place as the weapon select menu. So this means that if you're suddenly ambushed by an enemy, you have enough time to select how you want to deal with him and to craft new alchemical ammo if necessary. So for example, if you're trying to sneak past some guards and they see you, but there's rats around and they're holding a torch, you can craft some extinguish, throw it over the torch, and then the rats will just immediately engulf him, taking away the issue of the enemy trying to kill you. So that is one way that you can use alchemy to your advantage. And you craft it using materials you find around, such as alcohol or sulfur, so that's done just the same as in Innocence. And again, like in the first game, you're limited in how much you can carry at any one time, although that can be upgraded. So when it comes to the alchemy side of things, it is very similar to the first game, pretty much identical, but the way it's done is slightly different. So you can equip it with the sling or with a pot, and you craft it directly from there, whereas in the first game, you would craft them separately and throw them separately. So that's pretty much the main difference between alchemy in the first and second game. One small thing that I'm very glad they changed is that you now have an unlimited supply of rocks. So you just select them with your hand or your sling and you can throw as many as you like. And this removes the need to find them in your surroundings, and it's super convenient because they're such an essential part of the game. And I never really liked the idea of having to find my rocks so I could shoot them. It meant I couldn't practice with things. It just wasn't as interesting in my opinion. So I think just having an unlimited supply of rocks makes sense because rocks can be found anywhere. Amicia could easily just pick up handfuls of pebbles wherever she goes. It makes more sense to do it this way. So one new addition in Requiem is skills. And these are abilities that you develop passively as the game goes on, and it's based on your tactics. So there are progression bars in 3 areas. These are prudence, aggression, and opportunism. So the progress is determined by how you deal with the situations you find yourself in. So if you tend to sneak past guards rather than killing them, you develop the prudent skill, and you'll unlock abilities such as being able to walk more quietly, which is obviously useful if you're sticking to the stealthy side of things. So all the skills you develop are based on what you're using anyway, which is pretty clever. So if you tend to default to violence, you'll progress aggression, and that gives you skills like being able to push enemies into fire. And if you just do whatever's most efficient in the moment, you develop opportunism, and that improves your alchemical abilities. And this is the one that I seem to gravitate towards because my progress bar just goes zipping across as I kept on playing the game. Personally, I would have liked to go the aggression route as those skills are most useful, or at least fun in my opinion, because I like the idea of instead of having to carefully sneak past guards, just shoving him into a fire and killing him. I'm not entirely sure how the algorithm calculates it because I think you'd have to be really over the top in order to get more aggression, because I was certainly doing a lot of killing and my aggression bar was barely filling up. So I think the fact that I did play it cautiously every now and then is why opportunism went up so much. So if you're planning to go the aggression route, you're going to need to kill as much as you can, really. So yeah, be aware of that. Now, the Codex returns in this game, and this allows you to keep track of various items that you find whilst traversing the world. So you once again find flowers for Hugo's collection, but he also develops an interest in feathers, so as well as learning about flora, you learn some interesting facts about birds too. And I really like that each item you find has a little paragraph teaching you about it. I'm not sure if all the players stop to read them like I do, but personally I find it really interesting to learn new things. Like, I think it's a clever addition. I like any game that has a journal of some sort that keeps tracks with things you found throughout. And again, I just feel it really brings out that immersion that I was talking about earlier, making it feel less like a game and more like an experience. And there's also a section called Souvenirs, and this tracks certain moments such as conversation cutscenes and mini-games, and it allows you to replay them. So this is something that wasn't found in Innocence, but I do wish there were more mini-games rather than conversations, because I don't see the point in replaying small cutscenes that aren't really relevant to the story. So one example of that was at one point Amicia had a head injury, and Hugo helped her find some fabric to wrap around her head, and it was just a random conversation between the two of them as he put fabric on her head, and for some reason that became a souvenir that you could then replay. So I don't fully understand the souvenirs. I think they're partially linked to things that you don't have to do, because I could have skipped that fabric conversation, but either way I just don't really see that they add that much. But I do like that they're there anyway. I just wish that they were more varied, and again, like I said, mini games. So there was one mini game at the start where you practice using your sling, and I find stuff that actually has you interact with the game is more interesting than sitting back and watching something else happen. Overall, A Plague Tale Requiem continues the gameplay we grew accustomed to in Innocence, whilst also bringing in new elements that keep it fresh. The story is engaging, and the voice acting for the characters truly brings them to life, so I would definitely recommend it for anyone who likes skill-based adventure games with a slower pace. But if you're more into action, then this might not be exciting enough for your tastes. So for me, it was definitely an acquired taste. It took me a few hours to get into it when I first started playing A Plague Tale Innocence, but I think because I enjoyed the story and just the world of the game, it meant that I was able to enjoy Requiem more. So I'm not sure how it would feel jumping into this having not played Innocence, but I do still think it's a very good standalone game. I would advise, if you haven't played Innocence and you don't intend to play Innocence, go on YouTube and find like a summary of what happens in it, because the story for Requiem is very much a development of it. I feel that some games, the sequels are easier to dive into without playing the first, whereas with this one, to get the full sense of the story and to really understand the characters, it would be better to have a grasp of just some of the events that did go down. So that would be my personal advice. But yeah, definitely worth playing. I really enjoyed A Plague Tale Requiem, and I'm really excited to see where the company goes from here. And now let's take a look at the games that are coming soon to Game Pass. And these are all the ones that are coming onto the service in the first half of November. And as always, this includes games that have already been added since the last episode of the podcast, as I have to wait for the announcements from Xbox. So, on November 1st, we got The Legend of Tian Ding, and this is a campaign-based 2D beat-em-up game. It's got a very comic booky art style, which I really enjoyed in the trailer. It was kind of unique to see, and I just really like it when games give a unique style that you don't see every day. It looks to have very varied weapons and maneuvers, which means the gameplay is more interesting and unique rather than getting repetitive. And it's also got a fun soundtrack and sound effects, meaning you get a full experience with the visuals, the gameplay, and the audio. And the platforming elements in the game help create variety, because otherwise it would just be like any other Street Fighter type game essentially, whereas this means it's got loads of different things going on, and it's been generally well received as it got a Metacritic score of 80. Then, on November 3rd, we got Ghost Song. So this sci-fi Metroidvania places you in an unfamiliar alien world, where you have to navigate the strange environment, taking down enemies as you do so. The colour palette is exactly what you'd expect from a sci-fi game like this, with muted futuristic tones that very much fit the genre. It's been incredibly well received and has a super impressive 88% on Metacritic. Despite this though, I probably won't play it myself, just because I'm not particularly into sci-fi alien stuff, plus I tend to get lost in Metroidvania. So for example, I absolutely loved both Ori games, but I got lost. I never finished either of them. It's like I literally could not figure out which way to go. But if you've got a better sense of direction than me, and you almost certainly have, definitely check out the Ori games, as they are so fun. And then November 8th is Football Manager 2023, and I'm sorry, but I'm just not going to spend much time describing this one, because it's just Football Manager. It is going to be an updated version of all the other Football Manager games that are released every single year. So if you like football, but you prefer the behind the scenes stuff rather than actually kicking the ball around yourself, then you'll probably love this game. I know a lot of football fans and they can't get enough of Football Manager. But if you're like me and you find football ridiculously boring, then you won't. Because it's literally just football. There's nothing... If you're not into football, you are not going to get anything out of this. For what it's worth, though, I am very impressed with the amount of detail that goes into adding all the real-life players, as well as the ones for the future seasons. So I actually heard that Football Manager Scouts will actually go to watch the youth leagues, and they'll choose players to add to the game who they think will join clubs in future years. And I just think that's such awesome dedication. November 8th also sees Return to Monkey Island, and I never played the original Monkey Island games, but I've heard that they were popular, and they do seem to have an enthusiastic fan base. I did hear there were criticisms of the graphics for this new game. Personally, I think it looks really fun, like it's got an abstract, cartoony style, and I like that it's so unique. Just like I was saying with The Legend of Tian Ding, I think it's fun when games give you an art style that's not seen everywhere else on every single game. It makes that game stand out, and in my mind, that means it's more interesting to play because you've got visuals that you're not particularly used to. So Return to Monkey Island is an adventure game, and it offers puzzles for players to solve, and it has funny and interesting characters, and personally I'm really looking forward to giving this one a try. The trailer looks very fun, it's got a dedicated fan base which tells me it must have good quality in the previous games, so I have high hopes for this one. Then on November the 10th we're seeing Vampire Survivors. This pixelated bullet hell has a crazy amount of enemies and some epic skills to defeat them with. You have to survive as long as you can against hordes of those intent on killing you. So this is a roguelike, which means that when you die, it is game over and you start again from scratch. So you have to think carefully about what to upgrade to get the best possible run. And a really fun inclusion on this one is a Twitch mode, and that means that when streamers play it, they can allow their chat to make all the level up decisions, and I think that's such a fun way to make their stream more interactive and will definitely be appealing to people who do play on Twitch. Despite its relatively simple concept, Vampire Survivors has proved very popular with players, and it has a decent 84% on Metacritic. However, it is worth noting that this one is console only, so unfortunately the PC Game Pass players are out of luck as it's only coming to Xbox Game Pass for console. Then on November the 15th, we are getting Pentiment, and this will be great news for players who enjoy a medieval theme. This one is set in 16th century Bavaria, and it plays to all the tropes you'd expect to find in something like this. It even has a hand-drawn style that's reminiscent of the type of art produced in those days, as well as a historical font to match the theme. And I think that's so important to creating an immersive environment, is when the art, the font, everything connects to the story that you're telling. So this is a narrative adventure, and it's produced by Obsidian Entertainment, so you can be assured of the quality. And for any of you that are unaware, Obsidian are the studio behind other great games such as Grounded, The Outer Worlds, and Pillars of Eternity, as well as the highly anticipated Avowed that we'll hopefully be seeing in the near future. Grounded actually got its full game release about a month ago, so I did talk about it in one of my other podcast episodes. But back to Pentiment, it looks set to have a fantastic sense of humour, as well as a fun range of puzzles. And personally, I don't usually care for the medieval theme, but I may have to give this one a chance regardless, because based on the trailer, it looks like there's a lot going on. And like I say, I have a high respect for Obsidian Entertainment, so I think that I've done a really good job with this one, and it's definitely worth checking out once it comes on November the 15th. And also coming to Game Pass on November 15th is Somerville. And before I say anything else, let me make it known that this trailer has an absolutely beautiful soundtrack, and it is worth watching just for the music. It's got this classical instrumental style that really captures the emotions, and I love that soundtrack. But honestly, I wasn't able to glean much about the actual gameplay for this indie sci-fi adventure just from watching the trailer. But having read about it, it does sound intriguing. And the executive producer is Dino Patti, and that's who worked on the popular games Limbo and Inside by Playdead. And so players will have high hopes for Somerville if Dino's track record is anything to go by. And if you haven't played Limbo or Inside, they're short, really artistic games, and they're beautiful and fun to play, so they're definitely worth checking out as well. With Somerville, players will have to traverse dangerous environments whilst trying to solve a mysterious story and find their family. This looks set to be an interesting adventure for all who decide to play it. I'm not sure if I'll be one of them because, as I've mentioned before, sci-fi doesn't always appeal to me that much, but it could be perfect for you never know. And then with this podcast, I try to focus mainly on console as I play on Xbox, not PC, but if you are a PC Game Pass player, then on November 1st, you'll also have had The Walking Dead: A New Frontier and The Walking Dead Michonne, so it looks like they're putting a lot of The Walking Dead games up, because I know they put up Season 1 a couple of weeks ago as well. Alas, as the service is blessed with new titles, old ones have to make way for them. So these are all the games that will be disappearing on November the 15th, and make sure to play any that take your fancy. This month, a lot of them have pretty long completion times, so make sure to set plenty of hours aside for gaming. So the first one that's leaving is Football Manager 2022, and I know that players can pour hours and hours into these games, and I feel really bad if you've been working on a team for ages and now you have to rush to finish it. However, I would not recommend any new players to start this, because Football Manager 2023 is now available instead, and that will be staying on Game Pass presumably until this time next year, so it's worth just jumping in with the new one rather than trying to play Football Manager 2022 for like a week before it disappears. It's honestly not going to be worth it. Then we're also losing Art of Rally, and this here is one that I have seen so many times when scrolling through Game Pass for a new title to play, and every time I hover over it and I consider it, but then I move on to something else, and it's going to feel weird not seeing it there anymore, but I've had ample opportunity to play it and I decided not to, so that is on me. Still, now that it's my final chance, I may have to give it a go just to see what I've been missing. I used to love racing games as a teenager, but I haven't played one in a while. Art of Rally has a minimalist art style but managed to score at 80% on Metacritic, so I can only assume it's worth trying. I doubt I'll get very far on it though, because even just the main story is 16.5 hours, and it's more than double that if I'd wanted to fully complete it at 34.5 hours. Also leaving the service is Fae Tactics. Now, I'd heard of this one, but I'd never really checked it out until I was literally making this summary for the podcast. And it actually looks really good, and it has that typical pixelated 3D RPG style. And although the general scenery looks nothing like Pokemon, in a way it reminds me of it, as there are creatures you own that battle against others. So the story for this one is that you go on a journey to find your mother, and you engage in turn-based battles along the way, collecting various useful items such as talismans. It looks to be pretty heavy in story as well as strategy, and it would definitely be fun for any RPG fans. It looks like it leans into the genre very heavily and just brings you everything that you'd want from it. Watching the trailer makes me wish I found this game sooner, as it looks really enjoyable, but I simply don't have the 32.5 hours that it takes to beat the main story, let alone the astounding 124 hours for a completionist run. Stuff like this makes me wish that Xbox made us aware of games leaving a month or two in advance, rather than just 2 weeks, because it's simply not enough time to play the games and enjoy them. They really need to give us more of a heads up. Then we've got Next Space Rebels. This game isn't for everyone, but I'm sure its target audience will be gutted to see this one go. The plot of this is that there are a group of rebels trying to launch satellites to set up a new internet, as they no longer trust the current one. To do this, you have to build rockets. Experiment with various components and then launch your creations to see what works and what doesn't. I won't lie, this game doesn't appeal to me in the slightest, but I still appreciate the unique concept, as I like when games try something a bit different. If you want to play this, you'll need to hurry though, as the main story takes 21 hours and a completionist run is 90 hours. It's physically possible, but you would have to stay up a lot of late nights. We're also losing One Step from Eden. There seems to be quite a lot going on with this one. So this roguelike deck building strategy game has you playing as a character on a grid, fighting enemies that appear in front of and around you. Level up your skills and earn new ones as you defeat all those who would oppose you. I really like the look of the strategy trees, but the pixelated art style and very basic grid for the actual battles puts me off a little. Still, this one doesn't take as long to beat as some of the others on this list, and it only requires 8 hours of your time, although that does increase to a much higher 44 hours if you wanted to complete it. It got 82% on Metacritic though, so if this sounds like your type of genre, then it may well be worth at least watching the trailer. Then also leaving is Subnautica, and I remember when this came out, as it was all the rage with Twitch streamers, and it seemed like everyone and their mums were playing it. Like literally there were YouTube videos where gamers had roped their mums into playing. I watched a few of those streams to support my friends, but in the end I had to stop because it was too scary. It's not as bad as other more terrifying horror games, but it's still not for the faint-hearted. You explore deep underwater in your submarine, and some of the creatures you find down there are none too pleasant. This open-world adventure game has a heavy focus on exploration and survival. It's popular too, with a very impressive 87% rating on Metacritic. If you want to beat it though, it'll take you 29.5 hours, increasing to 55 hours for a completionist run. Finally, we've got Supraland. Now, I have had this downloaded for ages, but still haven't got around to playing it, so I need to get my hustle on. This super creative puzzle platformer combines genres to provide an open-world adventure game full of imaginative assets for players to interact with. Everything about the design of this game screams fun and accessible, and this feels like a game that could appeal to anyone and everyone. Although I might just be biased, as puzzle platformers and adventure are two of my favourite genres, so Supraland is everything that I love in a game. It's not just me though, and the game has an awesome 85% on Metacritic. I may have to hurry if I want to beat it before it goes away though, as the main story takes 13 hours, and it's 23 hours if I want to get to full completion. Still, this is definitely going to be my first stop on these Leaving Soon games, and then I may try a few laps in Art of Rally if I get the time. Now, I've decided to include a new feature for my first podcast episode of each month, and that's the Microsoft Rewards Top 10. If any of you aren't signed up to Microsoft Rewards, you definitely need to, as it's a great way to earn points that can be redeemed in the Microsoft Store, and all you need to do is play games and complete a few simple tasks on your Xbox. One way to earn points is with the Microsoft Rewards Top 10. So every month, Xbox chooses 10 games that are on Game Pass, and it gives you the chance to earn 500 points. All you need to do is earn an achievement in any one of them, and you'll get 500 points just like that. For November, the games are as follows: Fallout 76, Far Cry 5, Nobody Saves the World, Grounded, Turbo Golf Racing, Battletoads, Chivalry 2, Marvel's Avengers, Astroneer, and Gang Beasts. So if you're solely looking for the quickest achievement and then you want to go for Astroneer or Gang Beasts, both of them have an achievement for customizing yourself, and this can be done in seconds. For Astroneer, simply change your spacesuit from the menu. And then for Gang Beasts, again from the menu screen, just customize your character in whichever way you like, and that will pop the achievement for both of them, and like I said, can be done very quickly. However, if you want a quick achievement but also a game that you may want to consider playing all the way to the end, then you should try Nobody Saves the World. And that's not to say that Astroneer and Gang Beasts aren't good, I simply haven't played them so I can't comment on their quality, but I know that Nobody Saves the World is a lot of fun and I really enjoy the concept. So for the achievement, you'll need to play through the first dungeon, and you'll get the achievement after you beat the final fight of that first area. And this should take 10 to 15 minutes depending on how skilled you are, which I think is kind of useful because it means you've got a little bit of time to get used to the game and decide if it's for you, and if it's not for you, then you still only spent about 10 minutes getting the achievement, so it's a win-win either way. And Battletoads is also a lot of fun if you have a player 2 or a player 3 that you can play it with, and you get the first achievement simply by playing the first level of the campaign. This is one of my favourite co-op games, although it's not as good as It Takes Two, but it is definitely worth downloading. Unfortunately though, it only has couch co-op rather than online multiplayer, so you would need to find some friends or family to play with you in person. And that's the end of the show! Hopefully you've enjoyed learning about A Plague Tale Requiem and planning which games to play in the next couple of weeks. Don't forget to claim your reward points for the Microsoft Rewards Top 10, as it really is worth it over time. Next episode will be on the 21st November, and it is going to be a good one. As it's the 5th show, I'm doing a special episode, and this is going to be all about Game Pass games with easy achievements, so it's perfect for any gamerscore farmers out there. But it's not just about the quickest ones, and will only feature games that are enjoyable, as well as having easy achievements. I will see you then. Ciao for now!